The Veltar interrogation chamber was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, designed over millennia to break even the most resilient minds. Absolute darkness pressed against every surface, so complete that even the most sensitive optical organs would register nothing. The silence was equally perfect. Sound dampeners absorbed every echo, every breath, every heartbeat until the prisoner existed in a void of sensory deprivation. Commander Zixthul observed the human through thermal imaging from the adjacent control room, his four eyes studying the readouts with satisfaction. The creature sat motionless in the center of the chamber, hands resting calmly on his knees. Designation: Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Force, captured during the failed human assault on Proxima Station. How long do your kind typically last in the void chamber? Asked Sub-Commander Krelta, her mandibles clicking with anticipation. The Altarians broke after 6 hours, Zixthul replied, adjusting the atmospheric controls. The Centaurians managed 8. The Andromedans held out for nearly 12 before they began screaming for release. The human had been in the chamber for 14 hours now. Krelta's compound eyes shifted nervously. Perhaps we should increase the pressure differential? Or introduce the fear pheromones? Patience, Zixthul hissed. Observe. On the thermal display, Marcus Chen remained perfectly still. His body temperature was stable, his breathing regular. There was no sign of the hyperventilation, elevated heart rate, or thermal spikes that typically preceded psychological collapse. At hour 16, something changed. A low sound emerged from the chamber, barely audible at first, then growing stronger. The sound dampeners struggled to contain it as it resonated through the confined space. What is that noise? Krelta demanded, her claws scraping against the control panel. Zixthul's primary eyes dilated in confusion. The acoustic sensors were picking up a complex pattern of tones, rising and falling in deliberate sequences. It wasn't screaming or pleading, it was structured, purposeful. He's making music, the commander whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. The human's voice filled the chamber with something the Veltar had never encountered in this place. Beauty. The melody started simple, a haunting tune that seemed to transform the oppressive darkness into something welcoming. Then words joined the melody, words in the human's native language that neither alien understood but somehow felt. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. The song echoed through the chamber, and for the first time in the Void Room's history, the darkness seemed less absolute. The human's voice carried warmth, hope, defiance wrapped in harmony. Krelta stumbled backward from the control panel. Make him stop. The sound dampeners are at maximum, Zixthul replied, his four hands trembling as they worked the controls. The chamber should be absorbing everything, but the music continued growing stronger. Marcus had moved to a different song now, his voice carrying across languages and cultures of Earth. Spiritual hymns gave way to folk ballads, which transformed into battle anthems. Each song seemed to chip away at the chamber's psychological architecture. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. The Veltar guards outside the chamber began shifting uneasily. Several requested reassignment to other duties. The psychological weapon that had broken thousands of prisoners from dozens of species was failing against one human's voice. Sir, Krelta's voice cracked. The other prisoners are responding. On the facility's main monitors, thermal scans showed increased activity throughout the detention levels. Prisoners who had been catatonic for months were sitting up, turning toward the source of the music. Some were weeping. Others were smiling for the first time since their capture. Hour 24 arrived with Marcus transitioning to songs of his homeworld, melodies that spoke of green hills and blue skies, of children playing in sunlight, of lovers dancing under stars. His voice had grown hoarse but remained strong, each note a declaration that humanity could not be broken by darkness. The detention field generators are fluctuating, reported a technician, panic creeping into his voice. Something about the acoustic resonance is interfering with our equipment. Zixthul stared at the human on the thermal display. Marcus Chen sat in the same position he had maintained for over a day, but now the chamber around him seemed different. The darkness that had been a weapon had become his ally, a concert hall where his voice could reach every corner of the facility. He's not breaking, Krelta whispered. He's making the chamber break instead. Country roads take me home to the place I belong. The song hit something primal in every listener. Even the Veltar, with their fundamentally different neural architecture, felt an inexplicable pull towards something they couldn't name, nostalgia for places they'd never been, longing for connections they'd never understood. At hour 36, Zixthal made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his command. His hand shaking, he activated the chamber's release sequence. The door hissed open and harsh light flooded the void chamber. Marcus Chen blinked slowly, then looked up at the cameras with a smile that somehow conveyed both forgiveness and pity. "Thank you for the acoustics," he said, his voice rough but unbroken. "I haven't had a chance to practice in weeks." As the guards escorted him out, Marcus began humming quietly, a simple melody that followed them down the corridor through the detention levels and into the hearts of every being who heard it. The Veltar Void Chamber was decommissioned 3 days later. Official reports claimed technical malfunctions, but the truth spread through whispered conversations in dark corners of the galaxy. Humanity had turned their greatest weakness, their need for connection, for beauty, for hope, into their most powerful weapon. In the silence of space, no one can hear you scream, but they can hear you sing.